to The Trusted Advisor, a channel-focused podcast and video series powered by the Retail Solution Providers Association. I'm Jim Roddy, your host for today. Thank you so much for joining us. This pod and video series is designed specifically for point-of-sale resellers and software developers, and our goal is to educate you on the topics of technology, leadership, management, sales, marketing, and other small business best practices. Today on the podcast, we'll be talking about cannabis vertical opportunities for point-of-sale solution providers with special guest Harry Brelsford of 420MSP. Now, Harry has experience and knowledge in both the managed services provider community and also in the legal CBD and cannabis market. And Harry and I go way, way back. Harry, it's great to talk with you today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. So, Harry, can you please introduce yourself to our audience? And I'm hoping you can touch on SMB Nation and your history there, also the books you've published, and also 420 MSP, please.
Sure. Well, I fancy myself a career entrepreneur. I was an employee of a large regional accounting firm in the late 90s .com era when Small Business Server came out. But essentially, I'm unemployable and can't hold a job, so I found myself being more of an entrepreneur, and it's just the shoe fits, as it were. That said, so let's start with that marker. Exited the accounting firm in late '99 and started SMB Nation. So SMB Nation, we like to be thought of as a community of enthusiastic geeks, for lack of a better word, and what that means is we believe with the small business server era and beyond, we captured the enthusiasm and excitement of, say, the Macintosh community. The early Macintosh community was a really tight community. So that's where we like to play with SMB Nation, here yesterday, here today, here tomorrow, with the MSP community. However, Jim, as you know, the MSP community is evolving. And that's been the case for a number of years, not just the current world. And so I've done a couple of different startups over the past few years. Predictive Analytics one for a couple of years in Seattle. 3 years ago, started getting my head into the serious side of the cannabis technology supply chain. And Seattle was a great place to do that. We're, of course, since 2012 legal. And there's a lot of talent here, a lot of technology talent targeting that vertical. So I realize we'll talk about that today. Finally, the books. I have my little, camera-ready bookcase, such as yourself, but these are the books I've written over the years. Somehow I learned how to type for Microsoft Certified Professional Magazine back in the mid-90s and blah, 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 and that translated to books. And it's been a good ride. Books are a great calling card, but books do not a billionaire make. I'll leave it at that.
That is true. I tell people Stephen King makes money off books. Almost nobody else does, right? Like it's something that you said. It really does a good job of getting you attention, building up that authority, but it's not like big residual checks are coming in. What are you gonna do? Right. But it's still a fun thing to do. You won't stop doing them. What are some of the titles of your books, if you can share that with our audience?
Yeah, sure. A couple that I always like to point out. Well, this is probably the book that made my career. Was in the late '90s. Sam's Macmillan was the publisher. Teach Yourself Small Business Server in 21 Days. And Jim, the reason I go back to that's probably my first real hit in my niche. But more importantly, the design of the book, the 21 days, was brilliant because it aligns with the academic community. So it theoretically could have been used for a 17 or 16-week semester, right? It lined up really well for the use. And I wrote the book that way, that within a semester, you could become an SBSer. Now, the book that by far sold the most, I did the Windows Secrets book for IDG, now John Wiley, and that sold by far the most, and went to multiple printings and so on. Jim, that's back when people went to Barnes and Noble at the lunch hour and bought a couple of books, right? IT pros would come back to the office and actually read them.
Yeah.
Maybe one more example. Shout out to Microsoft. So the resource kits, and again, this is back when they had resource kits.
Okay.
But that was really cool because you're working with
Yeah.
the developers on the floor with the hidden hooks and the Easter eggs and secrets. Really cool.
Got it. Very nice. Well, thank you for that. And so let's bring it to modern day. You mentioned 420 MSP, and one thing you talked about at your 420 MSP Cannabis Conference, which thank you for having the RSPA on, for having me on as a guest there. Again, it's a 420 MSP Cannabis Tech Online Conference, first week in June. Did a lot of interviews there, a lot of conversations. A big thing you stressed was when we're talking cannabis, we're not talking about tie-dyed shirts, hippies, things like that, like almost this stereotypical of the marijuana market. Can you talk about when you say the cannabis vertical, what are you talking about? How should our audience understand that?
Well, I suggest, as you alluded to, this is not a lifestyle community. So 420 MSP is not the right place to wear a tie-dye shirt and all that. It's far closer to the serious side of the industry. And when in doubt, lead with the medical side first, right? And keep it serious. And a lot of people are passionate about that, right? Jim, everybody's got someone in their family that's benefiting from appropriate medicinal use for maybe aches and pains, so CBD, what have you. So keep it serious, lead with medical. I would throw hemp in the mix too. Hemp is part of the conversation, and that's legal in all 50 states. That's industrial hemp, and that's a serious opportunity that's here today. And then finally, go ahead and get into the recreational side. Again, it's very serious. There's a lot of compliance issues and so on. But that's how I would recommend that you get into it, is leave the recreational maybe a little bit further downstream until you learn the vertical.
Got it. So if anybody is looking for a whole bunch of cannabis puns, right, or stereotyping or joking or something like that, that's not what Harry and I are going to be doing for the next, 25 minutes or so, right? Like this is a serious business vertical that obviously has some different challenges, but a lot of folks I've talked to talk about the wine, beer, and liquor vertical. It's almost like, I don't want to say the next step from that, but it has more relations to that. Like you just don't make a whole bunch of kegger headstand or keg stand. Joe's kind of shows how unfamiliar I am with that. So we'll talk about that. So before we dive into that, so our audience today is point of sale VARs and ISVs. So in retail, restaurant, grocery, and C-store solution providers there. From your conference, what do you think were some of the biggest takeaways for that audience? It was across 4 days. There was a ton of takeaways. What are maybe one or two that come to mind that you'd want to share with this group?
Yeah, from an aspirational point of view and being opportunistic, I think a key point that I emphasized then, I want to emphasize again, was that in most states, most legal states, that the cannabis vertical received the essential services tag early on in the pandemic, and that did a couple of things. It validated the opportunity. And again, let's kind of keep our focus on medicinal. Now, medicinal is sold in dispensaries, so your audience can capitalize on that opportunity, and there's probably recreational too. But the essential services tag validated the vertical and accelerated the conversation. So literally this morning, I had a chat with Chuck Maines, the head lobbyist for the state of Texas for the hemp industry. We talk once a month, and he was giving me some procedural updates and administrative code and what lobbyists do. But he helped the city of Dallas give the CBD dispensaries the essential services tag early in the pandemic. And today he shared that the landscape in Texas is changing very, very quickly due to revenue shortfalls and shifting, quite frankly, some shifting winds politically. That's not why we're here. But he was reporting factually to me that it's shifting quickly. So I want to roll kind of with the shifting winds nationally, and then the essential services tag, and then finally the long-term invest forward mentality. So we are at the very beginning of this era, and it might have been used. said, imagine being there at the beginning when prohibition was taken away, right? And family fortunes were made thereafter. That's where we're at. So, there's some near-term opportunities, but I think more importantly, Jim, it's a little bit longer term investment. It is accelerating, but you have members that get that. You have to invest forward.
Right, and more every day. I just had a conversation with a reseller on Monday who's been in, second generation. It was father, daughters running the organization, restaurant vertical. Everything's restaurant. And now they're talking about, man, this pandemic has really hit us hard. What verticals would you think we should pivot to? And so we went through, pulled up a list of them of all the ones to consider. Cannabis was the one of most interest to them. And I guess if you can also, before we get into the opportunities and challenges, they also, they talked about they do business in Illinois. And so Illinois is one of the states. What are some of the key states where you think there's the biggest opportunity? I know that was a big thing that came out of this, out of your conference. It is going to be sweeping the nation at some point, but where are some of the near-term opportunities from a state standpoint that solution providers can jump in right away where it's legal?
Yeah, I would say Illinois is number one. Thank you, because it just went legal on the books January 1st of 2020, and now we're just past mid-year. And they are behind plan in terms of issuing or awarding the licenses. And behind plan is actually good for your membership and my community, because that means we haven't missed out. Right. And so it's a green field. And so when these awards are made, a date to be determined, they were supposed to be May 1st. So date to be determined.
People got busy. Yeah, things are going on differently.
Yeah, and my experience with the rollout has been it takes anywhere from 6 to 18 months, right? So if you're awarded a license on September 1st, realistically, you're not opening the doors till January 1st, maybe a little bit later. There's some procedural hoops. There's the physical nature of retail, right? The dispensary and building permits and electricity and all that. So it's a slow roll. That's number one. Number two, I'm going to go with Michigan. Michigan has been legal, I believe, for yet an additional year. But here again, it's a little bit of a slow roll for them. And then number three would be California. Now, California has been legal for some time, but for whatever reason, it's just been chaotic in California, and chaos creates opportunity. So maybe two examples of chaos. One is you have, and if you can picture this down by LAX, there's a lot of the little neighborhoods with 1- and 2-story buildings down by LAX. And you have a lot of illegal dispensaries, right? So you have people just kind of putting up a sign and a logo, and they're actually not licensed. The state is spending an inordinate amount of effort on enforcement, and that's taking away resources that they need to really accelerate the legal dispensaries. And then number two, California is just California. It's harder than it looks. That's the fourth biggest economy in the world, and they're behind. But again, that's good, because as we talk here, you're not too late.
Yeah, and California has cannabis regulations, of course, but then they also have their typical higher than average regulations as well. One of my favorite quotes, Gil Cargill, who you might know, he spoke a lot in the managed services industry, was a sales coach, and he would say in his deep voice, he would say, in California, we don't hire employees, we adopt them. And so all sorts of regulations you can kind of help folks cut through. So, okay, well, thank you for those states. So Illinois, Michigan, California, there are some other states where it is legal as well. And then there's some that'll be on the horizon, but that'll be for another day for us to talk about. Let's talk about this channel in particular. So can you frame up for our audience both the opportunities for solution providers and then also the challenges in the whole cannabis, CBD, hemp vertical? Now, you're way closer to it than me, but my understanding is they're both commensurately large. Great opportunities, but huge challenges, more than maybe any VAR has ever seen before. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, two thoughts. Number one would be partnering. So your audience has domain expertise and point of sale, right? My audience is the traditional managed services providers. So they're going to wake up in the morning thinking about cybersecurity and uh, TCP/IP packets, getting through the firewall, that kind of thing.
Okay.
And what I've seen over the years, Microsoft has encouraged the IAMCP, a trade group of Microsoft partners, has encouraged is partner to partner. And I think this is a perfect chance to do that. That I'm assuming some of your audience has little desire to run cable and, rabbit ears the Wi-Fi and this and that. And that's what our audience does. So I would say number one, the opportunity is partnering. Number two would be business acumen. So, and this came out in the conference. So let's assume for a second my audience, but more importantly your audience that's on the line. Essentially, they have started, owned, and operated a technology reseller or consultancy practice. Right? They school of hard knocks, MBA from life experience, that kind of thing. And that is needed. You got to wear that hat. You got to wear that hat when you come into the cannabis vertical, especially at the dispensary level, where these are, the personas are very interesting, Jim. You have people who came from the black market, so they're not the best business people, and they're a little paranoid. And they're also being, well, maybe we'll talk a little bit later about marketing to these people, but they're also, suspicious and hit on all the time by solution providers. So, driving up, leaving two business cards with the store manager, that's not going to work. There's other tactics to integrate into that community. And then on the business acumen chaos side, you can possibly be a hero. So think of it this way: there's an association of CPAs, accountants, and bookkeepers. Shout out to Dope CFO. Not totally on board with the name, but Dope CFO out of Bend, Oregon. They do great work. So they're kind of like 420 MSPs for accountants and CPAs, right? And there's an opportunity for you to be a term you're fond of, but the trusted advisor. And maybe you can even be the conductor that helps orchestrate some of these, the lawyer and the insurance. And so you got to think bigger, Jim. That's I think where I'll end my answer is you got to think much bigger than cash registers.
Yeah. So I guess talk about that. You said about business acumen. And so is it, hey, here's how you run a retail shop? Because I think that's part of what we had touched on during the conference was a lot of these folks started off as they were just selling the cannabis product. But then they realized, well, I can add on all sorts of, I know peripherals isn't the right word, but all sorts of other, tangential retail products as well. And so that makes their business more complex. Is that essentially what you're saying to our audience in terms of they will have to do some schoolwork on the cannabis vertical, but there's a lot that they bring in terms of customer experience, technology, inventory, things like that, that they would really be able to teach some of these cannabis business owners. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's correct. And I don't have a huge retail background. I touched retail, did a gig, did some work with Gateway Computers, Gateway Country Stores in the early 2000s. They were gorgeous. Learned a little bit about retail, put the repair window at the back of the store to make people walk through the store to deposit their computer to be repaired. You know what I'm saying? So I picked up some things. Now, give you a better answer. Agate Dreams, a dispensary over here in Kitsap County. I live across the bay in Seattle, and they are funded by an Indian tribe. That's a whole other story in terms of some of the legalities there. But when they opened up, Jim, they just had the glass retail display cases kind of in a little square with a couple of cash registers. They had all this empty space. Where are the t-shirts? Where's the glassware? Where's maybe a little fun virtual reality thing over here for customers to have some giggles? Today, I'm proud to say I didn't offer my advice, but it was up here. But now you go in and they have clothing, they have all the ancillary goods that go with it, they have books. Does that make sense? That's where I see some of the opportunity beyond the standard business workflow that you were outlining, inventory and so on.
Got it. If they can say, hey, here's really how to set up a store. Here's the way that you're going to move a lot of the merchandise and set up your product better.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, I'll get silly for a second, but I'm assuming it wouldn't be against regulations, but maybe they have a brick pizza oven over here cooking up little pizzas because, as you know, sometimes when you consume cannabis, you get the munchies. But
Yeah.
you see how
Okay.
I'm thinking is what are
Yeah.
complementary products, right?
Yes, to make it more of an experience rather than just almost like a garage sale. Like that's a lot of times it seems like some of these rudimentary places just set a bunch of stuff on a table and that's how they sell it. Let's talk about the partnering aspect, because one thing that really struck me was how many of these MSPs knew, like you said, about that networking component, or they were all the way back in the grow stage and they're like, I know agriculture, and I'm thinking, man, I haven't crossed agriculture in the, in the tech market in maybe forever. But in the RSPA world, our group doesn't know agriculture, but you saw these agriculture and other traditional MSPs, they get to the retail establishment and they're like, well, I guess it's just some POS system. Like they didn't know the nuances from that. Can you talk about how you see these partnerships potentially forming, what either one can bring to each other to make it work, and how they help each other?
Yeah. Well, synergy, but let me give you a family story. My dad once said, my dad was a career lawyer, and actually back in the days when lawyers liked being lawyers, I mean, he really liked being a lawyer, old school. And he said, these fellas that are both a CPA and a lawyer, or they're a medical doctor and a lawyer, right? So a medical doctor might be an expert witness in lawsuits. He said they're typically not good at both, right? The CPA would be closer to the mark. They're not the best accountant and they're not the best lawyer, right? There's returns to specialization, as we say in economics. And that's how I kind of view this, is that there's just not enough hours in the day to be a master of all trades. Pick your niche within a niche and stick with it, and then partner up, right? And put time into the relationship. What I found with joint ventures and partnerships, and in fact, later today, I'm going into Seattle for my weekly meeting with a cannabis organization that we're trying to do more partnering with in 2021. But Jim, I go in 1 day a week. I'm investing my time. I know you have to have that weekly meeting or cup of coffee or lunch to make these partner to partner relationships work. I've seen and been the victim and the perpetrator of many a failed partner to partner relationship, because you think you have agreement, but this stuff doesn't just happen on its own, man.
Yeah. Yeah, these are not going to be your traditional, hey, you're a software partner, I'm a hardware reseller, let's sign the agreement and move forward. It seems like it almost to be a customized based on each other's specialties, and they're really going to have to get to know each other to figure out where they're going to share, but they certainly can lift each other up and drive more business, providing that total solution, which nobody else really seems like they could.
Yeah, and then throw in maybe one additional thought would be, depending on the state, you either have vertical integration or you don't. So the state of Washington does not have vertical integration. I believe California does. And so that means, that one corporate entity could be the grower, the processor, and the dispensary. That's a very different supply chain motion than here, where they have to be separate entities, right? And that's okay, because that kind of plays into the traditional MSP with infrastructure is probably going to be happier upstream at the grow level and the processor manufacturing level. We get that, right? And then the point of sale, even just over the years, what was it? Microsoft Retail Systems, about the mid 2000s, they had a play. That was not a natural act for a lot of Microsoft partners, if that makes sense, right? That we kind of struggled to get our arms around that one.
For sure, it's a different world. I mean, it's a radically different vertical. And I guess before I ask, I have one more question before we take a commercial break. One thing, and this will tie in with the challenges, because that's my question for you. The challenges that the retail IT industry will face with the cannabis market. Just like you're saying, there's grow, there's process, there's a dispensary. It seems like where retail IT solution providers could play is more at that dispensary level, as opposed to getting into the grow and the production or the processing, as you say. So I guess that's kind of leading into my question about, can you talk about the challenges in the cannabis market for our audience? And I feel like, Harry, I can go walk down the hallway, I can take a nap, come back, and you can still be talking about it, because there's so many different challenges to it. I won't do that, but let her rip. Talk about the different challenges. Yeah.
I'll give you one that I think is beneficial today. So the consolidation, and that's a natural maturity of any industry, right? So cannabis a couple of years ago kind of had .com, right, and crazy money being thrown into the sector. And then last year was a natural correction, right, which is what markets do. That was the 2019. And don't guys, don't get mopey on me. That's okay. That's okay to have a natural correction, catch your breath. And now you're starting to see that long curve, right, of much like the internet era and coming out of .com, .gone, and Uber was born and Netflix was born and so on. And that's where we're headed. So, keep that top of mind, that there's going to be consolidations with the dispensaries, because you're seeing less and less. And I'm thinking of between here and Port Townsend, lovely little tourist town, there's this, hairpin corner, and there was sort of a 2-person dispensary in a log cabin called Seaweed. And
the puns just hurt me, Harry. I mean,
I know.
Dope. What was it? Dope CFO, Seaweed. All right, keep going.
Yeah, so one of your audience members maybe was able to go in and put in 1 or 2 cash registers with Seaweed, but Seaweed is got all the look and feel of a lifestyle business, and probably isn't going to make it long term, as we see consolidation. We see large chains of dispensaries, MedMen and a couple of others, right? So that's more your world, but I think that would be the strategic conversation, right? Is to accept that we're headed into consolidation. Now, here's the good news. It's going to take a decade. Okay, so good news is we have a green field.
Got it. Thank you for that. And we'll, when we get to the other side, we'll talk about some of the challenges of gathering information, because there's a lot to learn about this market. But let's pause here for a moment to let our listeners and viewers know an RSPA membership has never been more valuable or affordable. The RSPA has expanded its VAR and ISV member benefits to include discounts on health insurance, HR services, office supplies, and shipping. Also, RSPA members now have access to a legal advisor, security advisor, and a VAR and ISV business advisor. And Harry and I will be talking in the near future about maybe a cannabis community inside the RSPA, but I tease. So all of what I mentioned, except the cannabis community, all included in your annual RSPA membership, which a reseller starts at just $250 a year. That's 68 cents a day for these high-value services. You can accelerate your success by joining the RSPA today. Also, thanks to our sponsors who support the RSPA community and make this podcast and video series possible. Our platinum sponsors are Blue Star, Heartland, ScanSource, and Shift4 Payments. And then, so to receive the benefits of an RSPA membership or RSPA sponsorship, email membership@gorspa.org. So Harry, we looked at this market from a macro, 30,000 foot level. So if we can get granular now and talk about some specific actions that retail IT solution providers should take. Now, first, they have to get the knowledge before they get the skills, before they make the sale. So how can they get educated on this vertical? Of course, besides subscribing to receive RSPA content and going to 420MSP and signing up to receive your content as well. What are some reputable organizations, shows, websites, media outlets? Because it seems like that is the first step for these, for anybody who's listening to us who's not familiar with this market, to gather information.
Yeah. So a couple of thoughts that we'll start with the analytics. So let's start as a thinking person. Okay. and then I'll get a little more granular. But just yesterday, I keep looking off screen, and the reason is yesterday I was invited to an online event over the next couple of afternoons. Imagine that, like we did in early June. But it's BDS Analytics, BDS Analytics, and they are kind of the go-to on the market size, market opportunity, blah blah, economics, and so on. Think of them as a Forrester or a Gartner, but in this space. And so here's the deal: on short notice, and I wish I'd had more runway to work with them and get accepted as an analyst and not just a community. They had a thing over the next, well, currently as we're speaking, but MJ Unpacked. So again, a couple afternoons this week. And they had a speech yesterday that I think makes my point. Tamar Maritz, a VP of Business Development at BDS Analytics, gave a speech on the future of cannabis retail. Okay, that's a direct hit. Yep. And it was a panel, and they know what they're talking about, and so on. So I'm going to recommend BDSA as a starting point. Then the other one is a publication that has it serves two masters, but it does it well. It serves the growers, which is not the conversation we necessarily want to have today, but it also serves the retail and side in the dispensaries, and it's called Marijuana Venture. So Marijuana Venture is a magazine you can get. And Jim, they're the people that put the show on that you heard me mention a couple of times in our interaction, Rad Expo, Retail and Display Expo, okay, radexpo.com. And they still have on the calendar for early October in Las Vegas. It's a reasonable show, $200. It's both lecture and walk the floor. Here's the cool thing, and I've gotten to know them pretty well. The cool thing is it's a smaller show, and it's by design. It's a business to business show. And Jim, that's very important because you've heard me brag and talk, and I'm going to go again. Fingers crossed it'll happen in early December. But MJ BizCon, the biggest show of all, kind of like CES, right? I mean, it's the big one in Vegas, but that's quite frankly grown into a huge lifestyle show. People are celebrating now. 1,300 vendors. It's also serious, and you should go. And again, it's under $500 to walk the floor. It doesn't have a reputation for lecture. Okay, that's not what they really do. And Jim, one year when I went, the waiting list or the line to get into a 1 hour lecture was 1 hour. You had to wait 1 hour in the line to get into a 1 hour lecture. Wow. And it's more of a walk the floor and educate yourself. So those are three suggestions that I think we can get our arms around. BDS Analytics, anything they do, Marijuana Venture is a direct hit. And then, good golly, Miss Molly, you got to go to MJ BizCon. I mean, you just got to go, but manage your expectations, but you will come out wiser for it.
Yeah, and MJ BizCon is currently scheduled for December 2nd through 4th in Vegas. And I know, some of the folks who are in our industry, Dwayne Roebuck from Blue Star has been to that event. I think Dave Albert, who we had with Dwayne, and also Brian Meyer from Solvent, we did a cannabis CBD podcast earlier. I believe he had attended that as well. And that's what people say, like, it is drinking out of multiple fire hoses. Like, there's no doubt about it that you really want to prime yourself. You don't want that to be your starting point, MJ BizCon, because there's just so much to sort through and sift through.
Well, and think of it, if you don't mind, think of it this way. You got to do it once. Okay, you got to go to Mecca, and you got to do it once. Now, I think the risk of MJ BizCon is it's the big dog. It's trying to be everything to everybody, and it could go the way of Comdex over the next decade, right? So Comdex was the big dog until it wasn't, and then shows got much more specific, and that's just natural maturity. So go to MJ BizCon so you can say I was there.
Great. And there's also somebody says, well, I can't make it to these events. They have newsletters as well. Like I've signed up for the MJ BizCon newsletter, and you can see what are the things that they're talking about, so you stay in touch all year. So, well, good. And that's a big thing. So you have to get educated on this market. And thank you, Harry, for those 3 resources. Again, in addition to 420 MSP, you want to check that out as well. So we touched earlier, you talked about partnering, how important that was. How should a VAR go about finding the right cannabis partners? Where should they even, is it these shows? Are there other lists that they can find? Is it just internet searches? How do you find the right potential MSPs to partner with?
Yeah, still a work in progress. I'll take a side note on that, because one thing we could do, especially in 2021, and we're forward planning right now, but I might be able to assist with that in terms of putting up a directory, right? We're not a trade group, we're a community, but we kind of behave like that. We consider you a member, and we can have people opt in if they will allow their identity to be exposed. But the other thing would be check out the different meetups in your city, or start a meetup. So meetup.com is the best kept secret, right? That's a really powerful organic search engine. And I created a Seattle cannabis technology meetup, Jim, and I did it for some screenshots for a book I wrote on how to be a cannabis MSP and so on, and I forgot about it. And I paid $23 a month to keep it alive. And good golly, man, I went back one day and we're already over 70 members organically. So now it's like, well, I better have a meetup. And that was the idea of a little bit of a matchmaker, right? Because a lot of the members or the people that signed up for the meetup are business owners. A couple are IT pros looking to change careers. You always have that with meetups, the people that bring their resume to the Thursday night meetup. And then you have the MSPs. So I would recommend that. And then, but we're so young, you raise a really interesting question. It might well be that you just have to organically have a conversation with an MSP and say, hey, would you like to team and learn the cannabis vertical together? You know what I mean? It's so early, Jim.
Yep. Well, and that's where I think the big opportunity is. Now, it's not like, I always use the analogy of like, as you're going through a forest or a jungle of some sort, if there's already a path beaten down, well, good, it's faster for you to go through, but you also know there are a lot of people who have taken that path before. But this is very much, there's a jungle, you've got a sickle, and you're just hatcheting your way through, but you can be the first one there. And this is what also makes me think in terms of having a cannabis community inside the RSPA, invite you, try to recruit some of those MSPs in as well. I have a list, I won't show it on screen here because it has your name on it, just so you know, Harry, in a good way. But some folks who have said to me, I would definitely be interested in being a part of that. And if we could bring some of those MSPs into it and bring you into it, it just seems like that would be something that could really accelerate the success, because there is nothing out there right now. That's what, kind of what we're talking about is like, oh my gosh, there isn't a community for this. And it seems like we've got an opportunity to make those partnerships. I almost feel like we shouldn't be recording this, like we're airing all our strategic stuff, but hey, anybody who's listening to this, reach out to us and we'd be happy to make it happen.
Yeah, and I'll reach out to you because quite frankly, as a long time and existing trade association, quite frankly, that might be a faster and better way to put together a directory. You know what I'm saying? That that's not a natural act for us. Now, can I put together a back-end SQL instance and have a directory? Well, of course.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, you can do that. But there's also, for the folks who spoke at your conference, like I'm looking at them as some of the industry leaders, like Luis Alvarez, from California. He was phenomenal, and you'll probably be able to, spin a lot of the names off better than me because you go way back with them. But these were good folks. Blake Schwank, I believe, is another one. And so just a lot of good folks to reach out to there who would be a good place to start.
Yeah, again, everyone listening to this, we've all had a career, and we could all point to, oh man, back in the early days. Do you remember Gray Lancaster in the early SBS days? And he had the nickname Grandpa. Well, that's kind of what you're dealing with. You're kind of dealing with the founding fathers, right? And in 10 years, you're going to be able to say, hey, did you know Luis or Blake? You met Luis. You know
Yeah,
him.
yeah. Yeah, like,
That's where we're
wow, really? Like you knew him? Yeah. And I
at.
will say on the RSPA blog, if you just do a quick search on the RSPA site, go rspa.org, and just in the search, do cannabis. One of the articles we wrote recapping Harry's conference will come up. There's a lot of names in there if you want to start. And again, you can find those folks on LinkedIn. They're very, very accessible. So, well, Harry, before we wrap up, a couple questions for you. What's next for 420 MSP? What do you see in the rest of 2020 and then also into 2021? How do you see your organization morphing to serve the MSP, the solution provider community?
Yeah, we're doing a couple of things. So we'll certainly stick to the knitting for now, which is the MSP community that derives from SMB Nation. Just did a MailChimp recount the other day, 46,500 email addresses, of which I would say 50% of those have a high level of engagement. So they bought my book, they went to my conference, they gave me money. And if you give me money, I consider you a member. But so we have a top number, and then we have, an engagement number, and we're converting those over. And that's not a hard sell, right? The stigma surrounding cannabis has largely disappeared over the last couple of years. So that's number one. Number two, in 2021, I think you'll see us reach out to the IT pro community, much like a large community we partner with occasionally called Spiceworks out of Austin, Texas. So they're 5 million members. Their success is well earned, but they're IT pro, right? So that's going to be what I call the Dilbert cubicle dweller, the network admin who maybe works for a Canadian, well, I believe they're Canopy, one of the big dogs that can play when things are federally legal, right? All of a sudden you have enterprises when it goes federal legal. Right now it's still more SMB, which doesn't have a high density of IT pros. They tend to use the computer guy or MSP on the side. But we're going to have a conversation with the IT pros, so we want to go there. And then finally, we'll be partnering. So and you know this from being in media, and you and I, in fact, have partnered, but media's, well, not all media organizations. Let me preface this. Some are not partnering friendly, but most are, in my experience, because we're all in this together, right? And we understand, of course, there's going to be a Venn diagram with some overlap, and we're occasionally going to compete, but doggone it, we can have a beer at 5 p.m. You know what I mean? And more importantly, the synergy. Some of the publishers out there don't have a great technology message. Here's what I mean, and I'll hold my peace. Is when you look at some magazines that speak towards cannabis technology, and there's some out there, and there's some publishers. To them, that means test labs. So when they say technology, that's going to be testing for contamination, insecticides, the quality of the product. So, you get the certificate of authenticity in terms of the chemical nature of the product and that kind of thing. So think of test labs is what they call technology by and large. We think of DNS, TCP/IP, cloud, cybersecurity, backup, and so on. And I think there's an opportunity for me to carry that message into some media partnerships because no one's quite doing that. And I do not have a desire to run a magazine again. Did it for 7 years. Thank you very much. I'd rather team.
I agree. I think most publishers who are former publishers are in the same boat as you. No desire to go back. The heydays of that are unfortunately in the rearview mirror. Also, I'll let everybody know what's next for Harry and 420 MSP. August 26th and 27th, the RSPA Academy Education Symposium. There's going to be a panel, Cannabis 101, Understanding Your Opportunity. Harry's going to be part of that, and we'll be announcing registration for that soon, so you can check it out. My last question for you, Harry, is we're running out of time, and we love asking our guests this. Can you recommend for our audience a book to read? You've already given us some online resources to follow, a podcast to listen to that'll help them improve their organization, and you cannot say how to be an MSP by Harry Brelsford. But
Yeah.
talk about something else that you haven't produced besides the websites you already mentioned. Anything to help somebody, maybe not from a cannabis perspective, from a general how to run a business in the IP channel perspective.
Yeah, I'm preparing for this. I have a couple of how to run a business, and then I'm going to try to recall a pretty decent cannabis publisher. I'm hoping it's just one arm reach away. It's probably not. Jim, maybe I can get you the link for the third publisher I'm going to mention. But the first one is The Ultimate Sales Machine by Chet Holmes. Okay, so this is Business 101, and that's a big part of my being. And not only did I read it, but it's almost like I have margin notes, okay? I mean, this is almost like the Holy Bible, man. And here's the other cool thing. I got this on Audible. I'm not a big user of Audible, but I got it on Audible, and it really is cool to read a book and then listen to a book. That's the first one I ever did on that. And then I owe a lot of my success to the E-Myth Revisited by Gerber, a ISV in the traditional SMB nation space, a gentleman who was very early in multi-factor authentication. I mean, I'm talking, it's not a stretch to say 20 years ago, and he got acquired by a large ISV in my space, and his success is well deserved. But he gave me this book. He said, Harry, I care about you. I'm going to give you this book. And he's Canadian, and Canadians are nice, so he sent me the book. And but the E-Myth is, become the owner. So don't just be the pie maker at the bakery, even though you own the bakery. Become the bakery owner, right? Work on the business, and of course within it, you still need to, keep it real. But those are two that come together. And then the link I'm going to get to you, wish I'd had that handy, was a Harvard law professor a few years ago, wrote some books on compliance and how to open a dispensary and how to be a grower and this and that. Now, it's a little top heavy on the legal side, and that's okay. We have compliance issues and regulations. But Jim, I'll tell you, I bought his, it's basically a marijuana business plan book, $99. The others were priced like Westlaw books at $4.95, and I don't play in that game. Bought the $99 book at MJ BizCon a few years ago. People were like 12 deep trying to buy his books, and that actually motivated me. I'll get you that link.
All right, that'd be great. I don't know if I ever mentioned to you, Harry, that Michael Gerber spoke at an RSPA Retail Now event, I don't know, 7 years ago. He keynoted. I got to meet him there, and then I had reached out to him, and then he ended up getting back to me. I did a series of webinars with him, or it was me interviewing Michael Gerber one-on-one, and I can tell you, that guy is the same off the stage as he is on the stage.
Yeah.
Like that guy is true to himself, and he's eccentric, right? I mean, he's super opinionated, but very much in terms of instructional. He doesn't have you do whatever you want. He's like, this is the right way to do it. Like, he's got a proven methodology. So he's a one of a kind, no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. A unique economic talent, as we say, like a pro football player.
That's wonderful. And again, I would recommend How to Be an MSP by Harry Brelsford as well. Well, we are out of time, and we hope that you enjoyed our discussion today. If you did, be sure to subscribe to the RSPA YouTube channel and to the Trusted Advisor so you never miss an episode. We'd also appreciate if you'd rate us where you find your favorite podcast. The more stars, the better is my personal philosophy. And if you'd like to learn more best practices for VARs and ISVs in the point of sale channel, you can check out the RSPA blog. You can find it at gorspa.org and then clicking on RSPA blog. Before we go, thanks again very much to my good friend Harry Brelsford for sharing his wisdom with us today. Thanks also to RSPA Marcom Manager Chris Arnold for his production work, Joseph McDade for our music, and last but not least, thanks so much to you for listening. Our goal at the RSPA is to accelerate the success of our members in the point of sale ecosystem by providing knowledge and connections. For more information, please visit our website at gorspa.org. Thanks for listening, and goodbye, everybody.